I'm your host, Emmanuel. Keep on following us on Twitter, Facebook, and also on YouTube at Romy TV Africa for our daily brief and news-making headlines.
Now, Chief Jane Muchui, did illicit brewers kill my son to avenge crackdowns? Now, Chief Jane Muthoni, she is supposed to return to work after the bereavement period, but she is not sure she wants to. She is lost in a melee of fear, suspicion and anger on one end and the zeal to fight illicit brews on the other. The Gituamba chief strongly suspects that her son Joseph Muchui, 30, who was murdered by a group of villagers opposed to her crackdown on illicit alcohol in her location in Laikipia West. The first day of November, she says, remains the darkest day of her life. The day she was at home when she received a call from the village elder Mangi Murimi. He told me that I needed to go to an area called Plot 10 in Kiambogo sublocation. I did not suspect anything when he called. Joe had been away for 2 days, but I thought he had traveled or something, she said.
Chief Muchui told Nation Africa at her home that after that first call, several other people also called her, each asking her to rush to Plot 10. The calls became too many and she had to ignore some of them. And I quote, "I drove to Plot 10 with my nephew, Muiruri, and when I arrived at the shopping center, I saw a cluster of people gathered in different spots, and when all groups spotted my vehicle, they stared," she said. "I stopped and one man came to me and told me, 'Pole.' I wondered why he said he was sorry, and as I started to interrogate him, another villager came and pulled him aside. I could hear her quarreling and telling him that he needed to prepare me first. All this while, I wondered what they were telling about."
A few minutes later, another woman joined them and they asked her to allow them into her car. That is when they broke the news. I cried. I really cracked my son's body again. My aim was to try and establish if he had been murdered there or if his body was dropped there, she said. The training that we go through has some elements of crime scene analysis, and so I wanted to look out for some.
From her analysis, she suspected that her son was killed elsewhere and his body dropped at the corner of a farm at Plot 10. And I quote, "His clothes had no blood. I believe he was still alive, and when he was dropped there were signs he struggled to rise up. My favorite son tried to rise, but he could not." She said she suspects some illicit brew makers in her location conspired to kill her son because of her constant crackdown on them. Well, this is a very sad story. It's a very sad story because you find that your son is dead.
Yeah.
You don't know actually what led to the death. You still ask yourself how it happened because you say that he was found on a farm.
Yeah.
And on the farm standing Kenya-Uganda dispute of Nidingo Island, described rather hilariously by Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni as a senseless battle over some rocky grounds in Lake Victoria. In the interview, Duale also responds to the delicate issues of Kenya Defence Force latest deployment of Eastern Congo, the mission in Somalia, and the task ahead at the defense headquarters.
Now, I have no idea why he picked on me, as only he gained suitability, diligence and satisfaction that is required. And except for having an early crush with the military fraternity at high school, that is my Forces Academy, where I did my Form 5 and 6, and being a son-in-law of Army General, I have no military background. Nonetheless, I'm very much at home with the military fraternity, and I'll try to make a difference during my tenure as Defense CS. Kenya, Somalia, as well as those in Somalia, Ethiopia, and other parts of the Horn of Africa regard you as an influential,
first and longest serving leader of majority in the National Assembly. I now want to make a mark and impact in government. I need to add value to my government. And was asked, "And do you think you'll be conflicted with clan politics? This is what he answered. This is rather irritating, if not unfamiliar, unfair, questions that keep being directed at me. I'm not the first Kenyan from a community that transcends our borders. Our country's security.
As we settle down into office, there have been concerns among Kenyans over the militarization of government services. Should we expect an extension of the same by this government? It was wrong for the former President Uhuru Kenyatta to have given military personnel civilian authority, and the question of efficiency by KDF as the excuse for doing so should not arise here. Whether or not my officers can do a better job, that role must be played by the right institutions and personnel as envisaged by the Constitution. Devolution is particularly important and a critical phase of our Constitution, and that is why we maintain the notion of NMS, that is Nairobi Metropolitan Service, headed by a military officer, was a big mistake. Even the notion of transferring the Kenya Meat Commission docket to the military was inappropriate, and we are right now in the process of reversing that. I can assure you that going forward, the Commander-in-Chief of the KDF will revise any such previous mistakes.
Well, we can see that the CS of Defense wants to start his work as fast as possible, because you see that the Al-Shabaab, they have never stopped what they're doing. Even though they have been kept silent at the moment, but you never know when they will attack. So when he says about the wall that was constructed on the border between Kenya and Somalia, he wants to do something that it's going to help the Kenyan government. And let's wait and see what he's going to do about it, because he's not the CS of Defense. We all expect him to work hard and make sure that the security of Kenya and the people of Kenya are well protected.
So I think he's such a good leader, because despite him being a Muslim and related to the Somali community,
31st deadline to woo politicians allied to former President Uhuru Kenyatta and Azimio la Umoja, that the quest to unite Mount Kenya region under one political roof and mentoring young political leaders was unstoppable, and that he will ensure that those who had strayed into Azimio formation will be back by December 31st. Mr. Gachagua took on former President Uhuru Kenyatta.
Now, he asked leaders in the region to remain united, service political differences, and work together for the region development. As I have said before, politics is now over and it's time to serve the people. During the just concluded elections, Azimio had 13% of votes in this region, and we reached out to professionals, business people, and politicians who had gone astray. I have talked to many of them and have told me they were intimidated and coerced into joining Azimio and are ready to return to the fold, he said. Mr. Gachagua was addressing congregants at Reginah Catholic Church in his Mathira constituency backyard, said the Kenya Kwanza administration was focused on delivering on its promises and uniting the country. We want a peaceful country, and I and President William Ruto have a big task ahead to serve the people of Kenya and bring them together. Recently, President Ruto approached both Kilifi and Mombasa governors, and they are willing to work for us for the sake of development in this country, Mr. Gachagua added.
He called for the unity of Mount Kenya region despite political affiliation, but at the same time criticized the former president, claiming that Mr. Kenyatta had failed to mentor upcoming leaders and had left the region without a clear successor. The previous leader did not mentor our young leaders, and some of us who tried to raise our heads were met with harassment and intimidation. One of my roles now is to mentor young leaders. That is why you will be seeing me moving around accompanied by young politicians, he said. Several members of parliament from the region, led by Nyeri woman Rep Rahab Mukami, who accompanied the DP pledged their loyalty and assured they were solidly behind him as the regional leader, even as they sought to allay fears that crack were emerging in the Kenya Kwanza coalition. Mr. Gachagua had moved to take over political leadership of a region that experienced the most divisive political discourse in this year's general election. Now, we can see that the deputy president wants to unite the Mount Kenya region.
Yeah.
They want the leadership to keep on coming stronger and stronger, because you see at the moment that they see as if there is no leaders from Mount Kenya except from him. And he keeps on saying that the former president, Mr. Uhuru Kenyatta, did not mentor those young people and the youths to at least to come out and see what they can do for the government.
Yeah.
Do you think it's the right thing to criticize the former president for not doing what he said he was not doing?
I think it's not the right thing because I'm always forced to think that every time Mr. Gachagua speaks against the former president, it's because of the issues they had and the enmity they had formed in the previous regime. Because we saw Mr. Uhuru when he was in power, he closed, he freezed all the bank accounts of Mr. Gachagua because of some cases they were saying they had. And so every time he criticizes him, I think it's still the grudge he has against him, because he really gave him a hard time in his staff, in his working, in his even in terms of money. He really violated his right, even his privacy. So I think he's still holding on to that grudge which has never left him.
Well, we can see that he is one of the people from Kenya that he seriously has a grudge on the former president, because you see that every now and then when he talks, he is either talking about the former president or the chief opposition leader, Mr. Raila Amolo Odinga, and now he's criticizing the former president. But let's see if whatever he's saying is going to be the correct words he's saying, because we're expecting that to see more leaders coming from the younger generation at the moment. Let's see if he's going to mentor them.
Okay, now to some other stories. MPs from maize-growing regions oppose imports. Legislators from maize-growing zones in the country, particularly the Rift Valley, want the government to immediately halt importation of maize until it has moved the 2022 harvest, citing the interest of farmers. The elected leaders from the zones will be meeting Agriculture Cabinet Secretary Mithika Linturi and his trade counterpart Moses Kuria to discuss the way forward on plans to import maize. Nandi Senator Samson Cherengai, who is among those opposed to plans to import duty-free imports.
He told Mr. Kuria to suspend the process until February to allow farmers to harvest their maize and sell it. The senator said farmers from the maize-growing parts of the Rift Valley are anticipating a bumper harvest. Hence, importation of the maize will flood local markets at their expenses. For farmers in the North Rift and most parts of Kenya, where we plant maize, this is the harvest season, and we thought it wise that the Ministry of Trade should hold on importation of maize until we harvest ours, and the NCBP, the National Cereal and Produce Board, opens the stores for farmers to deliver their produce, he said, the Nandi senator. He wants the government to set viable prices for maize from farmers ahead the anticipated harvest. Mr. Cherengai said the importation of 10 million bags of maize will greatly affect the price of local maize, bearing in mind that the cost of farming inputs during the last planting season was extremely high. The legislator defending the opening of their stores for farmers to start delivery. We can see that the senator wants the government and trade sector to focus on the importation of current Tongaren constituency, Bungoma County, said Parliament will keenly scrutinize the CBC report before it is implemented. And I quote, "The current CBC curriculum is a milestone in the practical aspect of the education sector in the country. The National Assembly will be keen to sieve through the CBC report awaited to be tabled in Parliament this coming week," said Mr. Wetangula. Therefore, I call upon the parents and education stakeholders to be patient as the process of implementing the CBC curriculum is streamlined, said the Speaker.
Mr. Wetangula also urged Kenyans to support examination candidates for optimal performance. Thousands of learners are expected to sit for the national examinations beginning Monday. I will work with all our leaders, including our clerics, to ensure that our children receive the best education going forward. The church is a cornerstone of our existence, and it's our responsibility to ensure that God is at the center of all that we do, said Wetangula. The task force concluded its public participation hearings on reforming the CBC on November 12th. However, the Working Party continued accepting proposals from the general public until November 18th, that is on Friday. The Working Party is expected to compile views and provide suggestions on the areas to amend in a bid to improve the CBC across the country by November 12th.
Well, this CBC story has been the talk of the year currently. We can see that everyone wants to see the CBC task force be tabled in the Parliament and see how it's going to help in the education sector. Now, if I may ask, do you support this CBC structure?
I really support it, but as I always say and repeat again in so many several occasions, that CBC is good. Based on that, it is there to be precise on what the children want and what they want to pursue in life.
Yeah.
It's not giving them so many things that will not help them later in life. So I think it's a good program. But again, the requirements needed for CBC are so many and so expensive at some point. And I said there are some areas and remote areas in this country that parents cannot afford for the requirements the CBC is asking for. So my point was, as much as the CBC is there, the government should consider and provide these materials to communities that cannot afford these materials they're asking for. Yeah.
Well, you heard it there. We've come to the end of our newspaper review. This Monday, 21st. Here, keep on following us, talk to us at Romy TV Africa on Twitter, YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to our channel, hit that notification bell so that you may be notified in everything that comes up, and also keep on following us on TikTok and Instagram too. This was your morning newspaper review. I was your host, Emmanuel Onyango.
And I was your host, Reginah Samuel. I'll see you tomorrow, same time, same place. Have a nice day.
God bless you.